Today I'm going to talk about the Tone Equalizer module, which is one of my favorite modules in Darktable and one of the most useful and one that you should be using. You can cut it off. As you can see, I haven't really changed anything. It's just sitting here on. It's basically like if tone curves and shadows and highlights kind of had a baby. It is a good way to compress your dynamic range. It's a good way to add contrast. It's a good way to bring in shadows, to bring in to lighten highlights, and it's got this powerful masking feature that basically takes your image and breaks it up into 8 or 9 rather little zones from 0 EV to -8 AV, and it groups the pixels that are similar brightness together, and it allows you to adjust their luminosity independently. In fact, I'm just going to use Tone Equalizer to make this image pop. This is like a straight up import into Darktable. You know, we've got the default filmic, and you know, this isn't how I would approach a real image. I just want to kind of show you what you can do just with the Tone Equalizer without touching filmic, without touching exposure, just to show you how powerful this module is. This is not an advisable workflow. This is just like showing off. Okay. So if you open Tone Equalizer the first time, you're going to see the Simple tab, which just gives you these sliders to adjust the pixel, the luminosity, or the brightness basically, for each value from 0 to -8. As you can see here, I'm taking 0, moving it back and forth. You can see the 0 EV value is getting bright. We'll pick one in the middle, -4. You can see those getting brighter and darker. Kind of makes it look weird. This is all well and good, but you first need to make some adjustments in the masking before you can use this or the advanced. The advanced is the same sort of stuff. You know, you've got -8 to +0, so just like a usual histogram, you have got shadows on this far left and highlights on your far right. You have a histogram, which kind of roughly matches up with the big old histogram up here. But you need to spread this out to make it useful, because, you know, if you drag something over here, it's not doing a whole lot to the image because there's no data over here. Oh, and pro tip, you can indeed, if you've really screwed the pooch and made this look like something terrible, you can double click and just reset the curve. No harm, no foul. But to make this more useful, let's visit the masking tab. In the masking tab, you've got this luminance estimator. Leave this alone. The Euclidean norm here is fine. That's just how it decides what pixels to group with what pixels. The default's fine. Same thing basically for preserved details. EIGF is fine, and it does a very good job at kind of blending from one mask to another, so that you don't get sharp transitions and messes with local contrast like you would see in a typical tone curve. If you do like that tone curve look, you can set it to no. In fact, after I get to futzing with this thing, we'll kind of change that and show you the difference. I find that to be too harsh. I prefer the EIGF, and EIGF stands for Exposure Independent Guided Filter. So it basically, that's, you know, it just it's a guided filter that that makes the blurring of the masks independently of the exposure, if I'm saying that correctly. You know, leave it alone. If it's working, don't touch it. Filter diffusion. So this is kind of the number of iterations of the mask. So it'll run one iteration of the mask and of the guided filter, or multiple ones, and for each one you get a better mask, or better filter for each mask. You know, it does an intermediate mask and then and runs that again. You get a better one, but at expensive speed. You know, if you don't have a fast computer, leave it on 1. I find 1 to be plenty most of the time. Sometimes if it's a little bit rough Like if I'm getting like a harsh transition, I'll run it again and it'll kind of soften it up. Same with smoothing diameter. That's basically 5% of the long edge of your image. That's how much in a pixel value it takes into account around your mask to kind of blend that transition in. Again, if you're getting an area with a hard transition, you can mess with that. I find the default's fine for like 98, 99% of the images. Kind of same with that. This kind of changes the precision of the feathering, which goes into how well one mask blends into another. Again, if it looks rough, you can increase this, and we can kind of play with that too. So all of that, leave alone when you start. It's kind of a 5-second explanation there. I would start down here with the mask exposure compensation. This right here is like a little representation of your histogram, kind of like a block diagram that shows, you see how it's kind of shifted to the right or shifted to the right. Your line here is the middle. So I want to get that middle kind of more into the center of your bar there. And we also want to increase the contrast. And this is actually doing anything to the image. You see the image is staying the same. This is just the masks. This is just changing these values for the masking. So we're just going to do that to spread it out to give us more room to work with. And then we're going to try to center that back up again. And now if we pop out back here into advanced, you can see we've spread that out and we're using more of the histogram. We might back this off a little bit. Sometimes it's not quite exact. That's better. We don't have anything bunched up over here. Now, if you open an image and you see something like, we're going to do this on purpose. If you see this exclamation point in the advanced tab, that means you've done something is slid off the histogram. You need to come in here in masking and take a look, and you can see that we've clipped on our highlights, and then you need to bring that exposure compensation back down into something reasonable, and click on advanced again. And you see that's gone. Great. Now we have this histogram with this equalizer curve. I would skip the simple. I really don't use it. You can come in here and kind of adjust things. I sometimes more use it for fine adjustments of areas after I've done a curve. I would start with the advanced just because it's visually makes more sense. You know, shadows here, highlights here, here's your middle gray. So if you want your midtones to be brighter, you just drag that up. Easy as can be. If you want your shadows to be brighter, drag that up. If you want your shadows to be denser, darker, drag that down. You want your highlights to be brighter, drag this up. And look at there, we're already adding a lot of contrast to this image, and we haven't touched filmic, we haven't touched exposure. We've gone from this is your default to that with a couple of slides of this tool. We'll keep kind of tuning that in, right? All right, adding contrast, bringing that down a little bit. We can check our clipping. You can see that we are clipping on the dark end here a little bit. That's fine. I like dark, crispy shadows. Bring that down a little bit, maybe. You can also, if you're just looking visually at an image, you see this target here. You can just mouse over any part of the image, and see this line that's kind of jittering around here. That's telling you where it is on the graph. And then, so if you want to darken this part, you can actually just hold your mouse over it and then use your scroll wheel. That's all I'm doing now, and it will adjust that part of that particular area and that mask. So we're bringing that up and down, up, down, up, down, up. Yeah, it's that easy. So we've got something here that's kind of usable. We might need to bring those up a little bit. There we go. So again, we started with what we got, just with this one module. I haven't touched filmic. I haven't touched exposure. Probably isn't the advisable way to do it, but it's doable. So to show you the difference here on the preserved details, let's switch this to no. And you see how much sharper and harder that got? Compared to this looks like a little bit softer transitions. That's mainly the difference. The no basically makes it look like the tone curve. I'm going to close this and then zoom in. Get in here on some of these closer in areas and open it back up. And we'll go back to EGIF, and you can see that it's a little bit softer. The EGIF is a little bit more natural. It does a better job of feathering and blending and all that stuff so that your masks aren't so hard and you aren't affecting local contrast as bad. Okay, but you can do you, and you know, all of these do that subtly different. I find most of these to be I'm clipping on Luna's editor. Boink. You know, all these do something a little bit different. The guided filter was kind of the OG one, the averaged EGIF, EIGF, and then you've got the EIGF. I would just leave it on that, unless, you know, I only really go between no and EIGF because those are kind of the extremes. Anything else just seems very faint and not worth doing to me. Your mileage may vary. Again, with filter diffusion, you see how much more softer the transitions are if we bring up another iteration of it. If we add each iteration, it gets a little bit softer and smoother transitions. 1 to 2 is usually pretty okay. Smoothing diameter kind of does the same thing. It just gives you 3 or 4 levers to pull to kind of fine tune that. And we're going to smash that down a little bit more and bring that up. So there we go. Just with this one tool, we have gone from flat, boring, to slightly less boring, slightly less flat. If we wanted to add some pop to this, I would go into color balance RGB, and I would just pick the basic colorfulness standard as a starting point, and, you know, bring in some more vibrance, bring in some more saturation in the highlights, maybe a little bit more global saturation, and give it a little bit more pop. And there you go. I touched 2 modules, count them, 1, 2. This is, you know, what it looks like when it's imported to this. I didn't mess with Filmic, I didn't mess with exposure. Granted, this is a reasonably well exposed image. You know, the histogram was kind of middle-ish. You know, it's an even scene, so it wasn't too challenging, but it is completely doable with just these 2 modules. Next, let's see how we can apply this in a slightly more realistic fashion, where I would actually be approaching this how I would edit a real image. I wouldn't just start off and just use Tone Equalizer. So first things first, we've got this portrait here. I'm going to rotate in perspective. I'm gonna get this kind of, I was, you know, kind of cattywampus when I was shooting this, standing up in a window, actually, if I remember correctly. This gentleman was a lot taller than I am. And I'm going to come in here into Filmic and set this black and white point somewhere reasonable. Get some contrast in it. Attitude, I'm going to look at the highlight saturation here and see what looks better. I'm going to pull some of that out so that the highlights kind of go bleached. And we're going to, let's see here. Supposed to be kind of a dark, haunting image. This is Gomez. This is for a musical theater for university, so it's supposed to be a bit kind of creepy. We'll kind of go with that. I was using red light and everything. Might bring in some more there. All right. So we've got our Filmic. We've got our middle gray kind of set where we want it. I just dragged the histogram there for adjustment. Now let's visit Tone Equalizer, and we'll cut it on again. Visit the mask, take a look at it. I might back a little contrast out of there just so that we can fit it better. Yeah, there we go. Now it fits more neatly. That may be a little too much. We'll kind of do that to spread it out a little bit. There we go. Now we're getting something in every zone. I want to darken up the shadows a good bit, so I can do that. I can bring the midtones kind of down a little bit. Maybe bring the highlights up some. There we go. I think that hit his face a little bit better. It's a little much. Be in there. There you go. Make that pop. And again, this is just like a shadows and highlights tool. We kind of just brought the shadows down, brought the light up on his face a little bit better, so his face pops a little bit more. Like I said, it's supposed to be dark and creepy. I would probably go into color calibration and play with the gamut compression a little bit. There we go, just to make it look a little bit better. And once again, my color balance RGB, basic colorfulness, standard. That's a general starting point for me these days. Scrolling some more vibrance, maybe bring up the highlights a little bit. Definitely bring in the saturation and the shadows, maybe in the mids a little bit, so we can cut that on and off. Bring up that red a little bit. That might be a bit much, actually. We'll bring her down. And with that, and maybe pop back out to filmic or contrast a little bit of some adjustments. But there we go. So we have gone from our imported image flat to this. Got a little bit more pop to it. This red's kind of showing a bit more. We've darkened up the shadows because it was shot in a stairwell. Sometimes you shoot with what you got. And so we darkened that up a little bit, so that's a little bit less kind of standoutish. And we've brought up his face a little bit with this part of it. Again, you can come in here and you can change this to no. And you can see how much harsh that looks. It just, like, especially around this stair, these handrails and stuff, that just looks a bit harsh. So we'll leave it on EGIF. Maybe we'll crank up the filter diffusion, see what that gets us. And it really depends on the image. That's really not getting us much, so we'll leave it. Again, don't mess with this unless you find some edge cases, literally. So that's another quick and dirty tone equalizer edit. Finally, we're going to hit this image here and see just how far you can stretch things. First things first, I'm going to cut off filmic and show you that this could work with sigmoid just the same. We can add some contrast and whatever else. But first, we're going to, I'm going to bring up this mid-tones here. We're really stretching things. There we go. And we're going to hit Tone Equalizer. Bring that in the middle. Yep, that looks pretty good. And we're going to mouse around in here and find where we want to bring it up. Bring up that a little bit more. This might be one of those images where it doesn't hurt to play with the masking a little bit. Nah, we'll leave it there. What if we did a few more runs of the filter diffusion? That's helping a little bit. Mess with the smoothing. You can see how much harder and less fuzzy things are looking when you bring up the amount of smoothing. It makes it harder line. We're going to bring down the smoothing a little bit. And refinement. And again, this is just moving the slider and seeing what looks better. I don't really have any kind of insider knowledge here. I'm just playing with, read the manual and know what those sliders affect and try to get it to fit this image. Mask quantization, let's see. Yeah, that brings back a little bit of our edge there. All right, so got some more in there. There we go. We can start bringing up some of that sky. What I was really trying to do here was to get some more sharper contrast in these shadows. Bring this up a little bit more. Maybe not that much. I mean, there is something here, but it's not great. It's kind of muddy, and I'd rather just have a black hill there to have that just as a contrast in the foreground. All right. Now, we've gone from just the exposure, the tone equalizer, really making some stuff pop there. We really got some more details in the hill. We have not really touched sigmoid, have we? I think we have. Yeah, we haven't even really touched it. It says default. So we can come skew the contrast a little bit more towards the highlights and bring in some more, maybe a little bit there. Maybe attenuate that red a little bit. That's getting a bit kind of out there. And we might actually not preserve the hue so much so that salmon color isn't so bothersome. We'll scroll that back down a little bit. All right, so we've gone from this was the default imported to this. In a few simple steps, a lot of the heavy lifting there was done by Tone Equalizer. I see a lot of people trying to do the heavy lifting of tone mapping, of the not the tone mapping, but of the shadows and the highlights balancing and things of that nature, and the dynamic range compression stuff in Sigmoid or in Filmic. You can do it, but you shouldn't rely on those for the heavy lifting. Those should really just be display transforms. Takes your data from your camera space and puts it in your display space. So they should be kind of straightforward adjustments. When you want to really play, you really want to dodge burn, make some adjustments, you should be coming in the tone adjustments to shadow levels, highlight levels, all of that stuff. You should be doing it in Tone Equalizer. Maybe change this a little bit here. Here we go. That looks pretty good. We are clipping a little, but I don't care. We started with that, and we got to that just from a few simple adjustments. What'd that take? 2 minutes? Hopefully you found this useful. And if you have any questions, leave it below. This is really just to touch on this video is just to touch on this one module, because it is so important. It does all the work for you. If you want to see something else in the next one, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to go about making videos as I see fit, or as I kind of come across things and want to answer questions. Thanks for watching, and I guess see you in the next time.